Our first business was actually in hospitality, which is not recommend for anyone to be their first business. But it was a dessert bar. We're going to move to New York City because what better place is there to explore fashion and technology? Considering that I've been in entrepreneurship for quite a while and just sheer will and grit have just made things happen, even though it's looked like we've been in so much debt. I think for me, it's either this or I have to go back to corporate and do the corporate thing. I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to keep taking these risks.
Today we have Deidre Tshien, who is a co-founder and CEO of CapSho, a groundbreaking AI-powered platform that helps coaches, service providers and podcasters turn their audio and video content into compelling marketing assets quickly and effortlessly. With over 8 years of entrepreneurial experience, Deidre's journey spans multiple industries, including hospitality, fashion tech, e-commerce, and digital marketing. Under her leadership at CapSho, she has become a go-to tool for entrepreneurs who want to streamline their marketing efforts. The platform allows users to upload a single piece of content like a podcast episode or presentation and automatically generate SEO-optimized show notes, blog posts, email copy, and much, much more. Hey Deidre, how are you today?
I am so good. Hi, Mark. I am honoured to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me today. So this is a really interesting thing. A lot of my audience are entrepreneurs, business owners, but they're also content providers as well. So they've got podcasts, they do webinars and things like this. So I really think this could be really targeted for them. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you.
Yeah, this is going to be such a fun episode. Such a fun conversation.
And so, as always, I ask the first question to all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
Oh man, I could answer this in so many different ways because I can tell you I have, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs have been through so many ups and downs. I used to probably think that resilience was like which it still is. When you think about what lies under resilience, it's words that come to mind for me is adaptability, flexibility, open-mindedness, things like that, because I can tell you through my journey of entrepreneurship, I have had to eat some humble pie every now and then and say I was that was the wrong call that I made for XYZ reasons because hindsight is 2020. But being willing to be open and learn from all of that and be flexible in the approach going forward is, I found, what's key to really being able to adapt and grow a business.
Yeah, I would agree. And we're going to talk about your multiple businesses before you got to CapSho. But I want to ask you after this one is, tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
I don't know if this is going to be a video, but I don't sound, so I'm Asian by ethnicity, by background. My parents were first migrants into Australia from Malaysia. And it was it's an interesting generational cultural place to be when you're brought up with still the very Asian cultures and mindsets. You have a particular path. My path was to become a doctor and you had to hit these particular milestones being like get into the best schools, perform in the top whatever of tests and play the piano and do all these things. But that was also tempered or I guess mixed with the Western culture that I was also like, I had a lot of my friends and just what I was surrounded by. So it was a really interesting dichotomy, I think, of like these sometimes competing cultures and trying to navigate through that. I think that navigation and problem solving and trying to talk, i.e. message, that's played into with the businesses, definitely on the marketing side of things like that. So I'd say that, that's probably one big thing that's from my upbringing has entered into my entrepreneurship world.
So did you go into university or college with doing a degree in medicine?
Funny enough, I was in 12th grade and we were there doing our preferences of universities and degrees that we wanted to do. And after I was like, hey, if I don't get into medicine, like what what would make sense? And I was sitting there, and the obvious choice is something like medical science, some kind of, because and I just could not stomach the thought of doing any sciences. I realized that I actually really hate or I did not enjoy studying science.
Right.
And so I made a deal with my parents that because I actually really wanted to study business, and a business degree is for them not as prestigious, let's call it that. I made a deal that I would do a combined law and business degree. So that's what I ended up doing, a business degree.
And has the law part helped you?
Oh gosh, I have not. I was like very early on into that. I was like, I'm not going into law. I knew that pretty much straight away. Like there are definitely some skills that I learned through doing the law degree and how they think about case law and things like that I do think I still sometimes apply today, even if it's subconsciously.
So you started multiple businesses before CapSho. Before we go into some of those, what drove you or what fueled you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, somewhat by accident, I would say. I didn't think, again, being in my mind, I was like, I have a path. The path then for me was finish my degree, get into a really good graduate program. You think investment banking, management consulting. I interned at a management consulting firm. I was actually working part-time at an investment bank, and I actually ended up doing started my graduate career in an investment bank, the big in Australia. And so I thought that was my path, like just climb that corporate ladder and do the thing. I was fortunate actually that I was put on a project that was pretty high visibility across the bank at that time. It was actually one of those like once in a decade type regulatory reforms that was happening across the country. And it actually gave me pretty early on, so I was in my early to mid 20s, visibility to, senior leaders all the way up to the CEO. And I'd be part of these conversations, which was like crazy to me. And the more that I sat back and looked around the room and I could see the underlying politicking that was happening and the positioning and all of that, I realized then that it just didn't vibe with me as a millennial going through my quarter life crisis. And so for me, I was like, oh gosh, I saw what I had to become to climb the corporate ladder, and I didn't really want to do that. Now, at the same time, my partner, now husband, he was studying medicine, funnily enough, and he was miserable. He was hating it. And so it was over a period of time where we were discussing like what would make sense. We were both in our quarter life crises, basically not really enjoying what we were doing, at a bit of a loose end. And we had just actually moved out together, and he was really enjoying cooking and particularly baking, because I love desserts. I love anything chocolate based. I have the biggest sweet tooth. And there was this particular dessert that we always used to, when we would just go out for dates and stuff, we would go to this restaurant, this Italian restaurant, and we get this like decadent lava pudding, this chocolate lava pudding. And when we moved out, he started making that for me, or perfecting the recipes and stuff. And there was just one night, I think we were, just at our dining table eating dessert, and we're like, I wonder if this is something that we could explore. He loved making desserts. I didn't have any particular skills at the time. I was like, I'll just be around. I'll be there doing. But we made that happen. So our first business was actually in hospitality, which is not something that I would recommend for anyone to be their first business. But it was a dessert bar. It was a dessert bar that was basically all around freshly made desserts, and that's what we opened back in 2013. So it was almost by accident in Feel Way.
And that set you on a trajectory for other businesses. What did you learn from your experiences of a couple of businesses that you started and invariably they didn't catch on?
Oh gosh. So like the hospitality business, we were fortunate. I think it was almost by sheer will and grit that we were like, we are just, come hell or high water, we're going to make this work. And so we actually grew that dessert bar brand called the Choc Pot in Sydney. We grew that to 5 locations. And we actually started a burger restaurant a few years down the track alongside that called Stacks on Burgers, and we grew that to 2 locations. And then fast forward a little bit, we found out at the end of 2018 that one of our store managers had been stealing from us for quite a while as well. So it was like a good chunk of money that we didn't realize was being stolen from us. Like we knew that sales were dropping. We knew that, it wasn't great. It forced us to be, and that's what I mean by like sheer will and grit, because it was like, we have to make this work. So it just forced us to be more innovative around products and way more efficient with our back end processes and our staffing and things like that. And I think that's, in a way, it just forced us to think differently, which is really hard to do when you're making good money and things are just happening. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like that's generally how, but we were forced to because it felt all broken. So there are a ton of things. That being the first business, as I mentioned, hospitality is like probably the hardest business, especially first business that you could go into. Having to manage rent, you're basically in the red before you even open the door by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I learned a lot, I think, about what I don't want to be doing anymore, which is probably in that industry. But given like everything that you have at your disposal, like how can you actually make the best and make the most out of what it is that you do have? And that's what we've always had to do. So that's, I feel like, what we brought into all of our subsequent businesses, some which we did fail as well after that.
When did you know when to pull the plug on those businesses? Because it's something that people often ask, like something isn't quite 100% working, but it's not failing. How do you know when to pull the plug?
I had so basically when we moved to the States, so I'll just give you the timeline, but basically once we found out that store manager had been stealing from us, that was for me the straw that broke the camel's back. And we'd been grinding it out for so long, and it was just at the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I didn't want to. And at the time I was actually working with another co-founder, someone who I had actually met in corporate, and we were exploring a fashion technology idea. And for me, when all of this kind of happened, I was just like, you know what? I just want to like a bit of a fresh start. I want to experience more than, because we've just been so in our business to the point where you can imagine like when you're in your mid-20s, your friends are getting married and things like we missed going to weddings. We missed a ton of things because we just had, it was all hands on deck with the business. And I was just like, I just want to have new experiences. And I just made the decision. I spoke to my husband, I spoke to my co-founder, and I was like, we're just going to move. We're going to move to New York City because what better place is there to explore fashion and technology? I was literally like, there was a little bit of thinking behind it, i.e. if we had to scale a fashion technology business, it would have to be either in Asia or the Americas. Like Australia is just such a small market. We knew that from the beginning. And I was like, instead of waiting for that, why don't we just go and see? And so that's what we did, which was crazy. So mid 2019, which was really great timing, we moved to New York and we hit the ground running around exploring this fashion technology idea. We hadn't invested in any technology build at that time. We were manually really doing all the things. And we were speaking at that time in New York, we were speaking to like young professionals on Wall Street, NYU campuses, Columbia campuses, just testing this idea. Right. And it was probably about 4 months into that we looked at, between our findings and everything. And no matter how much we wanted this to be the thing, I think there was something, there's always a sense. So you always start with some intuition and then and the data has to back that up as well. But what we did find was that these ladies were lovely and they were super supportive and really giving with their time to these random Australians on the street talking to them. And what we found was that while there was a problem there that we were solving, the problem wasn't big enough for them to change their habits for quickly. Right. And that for us was the big because if they're not going to change their habits quickly, then in terms of runway, didn't have that kind of runway. Like we didn't have the money, we didn't have the time to go down this path and make it work. And so that for us was what made our decision to fail that particular. Yeah.
All right.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it did. Let's fast forward to CapSho. So tell me about it. Tell me about who you serve, who's your clients, and just share about your business.
Yeah, okay. When we failed that idea, fast forward we had an agency business. We then transitioned that into coaching when COVID hit, etc. And with that coaching business, it was helping e-commerce business owners with their digital marketing. We actually started our first podcast. And it was through that experience of having to market a business, having to market a podcast as well, which kind of seemed, I felt at the time as well, we were listening to the likes of Gary Vee and stuff who were saying like, be on every platform, content domination, all of that sort of stuff. And so we were it felt like we were marketing two different entities in all places at once. And honestly, it burnt me and my team out. Like it was just insane. It was like all we were doing was creating content. It felt different. And we were trying to be really intentional with each of the platforms. So even though we were trying to be on all the platforms, we knew that already that different things work on different platforms. So we were creating literally different content for all the different platforms for multiple times a week, all the things. And when I stepped back from that, we were burning out from it. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. In my corporate career, way back when, one of my roles had been to assess emerging technologies. So even, well over a decade ago, I was already looking at things like blockchain, not the AI that we know now, but very nascent. And it was all very use case driven. And so when I looked at what it was that we were trying to do, I was like, this is actually a really great use case for the application of this technology. So we actually that's actually what, to end of 2021, we started working on CapSho. We launched our beta mid-2022. So that was before ChatGPT and everything came onto the scene. And yeah, it was amazing at the time because AI was definitely not a known thing at all. We went to PodFest in 2022, May of 2022, and we were showing people what it was because we were trying to get beta signups. And people were just minds were being blown because they would look at, for example, show notes that were getting drafted for them from their episode. And it was like, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I did say that. I said, like, how is this even possible? And so that was a ton of fun. That in a way is how CapSho came to be.
So as you say, like AI has only really been hitting mainstream in the last year or so. So how would you say that? Just tell me a bit more about the service. So you're getting content that's being created by podcasters, webinars, by other longer formats. Yeah. And you're creating aspects of show notes, posts, social media posts, titles, things like that. Just let's go behind the technology just for a minute. So how do you actually do that? What's the sort of makeup of the tech side? Because some of my audience are quite techy and they'll want to know how you're building that to be able to. I've trialed it and it's really good. It's an amazing service that you provide. But how do you do that to make that so effective for your clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. It has had to change over time as well because obviously when we first launched, we were actually in the middle of building our own essentially LLM system. But when all of these LLMs started, and they just have access to way more data than we ever could. So we started to blend. So we leverage LLMs that are currently out there with our own proprietary. So it's become a bit of a blend now from a back-end perspective. And we do that because one is because we've already done that path and we have a lot of IP as well that sits behind it around how we craft, and the reason being and I'll take a little bit of a detour here because I do get asked this. When ChatGPT, and we had an influx of competitors come onto the scene beginning of 2023, we had to be really, it felt like at the time we had started stretching ourselves a little bit thinly by way of, because we were the first to market, we had a lot of people had different needs. We had agencies on who required certain things for them. We had creators, we had entrepreneurs, we had all of these different audiences that we use in CapSho, and we started to see ourselves making product decisions based on, because we do like to talk to our audience and get feedback and improve the product based on what it is that they tell us. And when we had these influx of competitors and obviously LLM tools, etc., we really had to go back to basics around who it is that we are really passionate about serving and how we were going to help to serve them. And so we actually we were like, okay, sorry, agencies, we love you. We're just not going to be the tool for you. Even creators, like we were like entrepreneurs, because that's our background. We had a podcast because we had a service at the end of the day that we were trying to sell and promote through content. And so we became really focused on, we serve entrepreneurs, so coaches, consultants, service providers who are creating content in order to get results for their business. And so when we can get really targeted on that starts to actually help us, going back to tech, but also the strategically behind, like what underpins, because any of us can write a prompt in a ChatGPT and get something out of it. That it doesn't have quite the same results as, for example, our social media post. We actually co-created that with a social media expert. So we actually follow her 4-post strategy inside of CapSho, because that's how, again, she serves entrepreneurs who are looking to use social media to get someone from awareness of a problem or a solution all the way to action. So we leverage her strategy and built that proprietary knowledge into our systems to actually create content, help our users create content that actually gets results. Same thing from a blog perspective, same thing from a show. We co-create things with people, with experts in their industry who have proven to get results. And that's like some of the IP that we put into the system. So yeah, that's some of our magic sauce that we have inside of CapSho.
Thank you. Funding? How many have you had rounds of funding?
No, we're bootstrapped. Yeah, we're currently bootstrapped.
And that's unusual for a tech company to be bootstrapped.
Yeah. We had early on, we were thinking about it. Obviously, it would have made the journey it feels like it would have made the journey a lot easier. But after talking to a few other tech founders who have had funding and not funding and stuff, we realized that getting funding sounds really sexy and really, it just makes things so much simple. It feels like it makes things so much simpler, but really under the hood, you've just basically got yourself a new boss, which we didn't want. So yeah, we've decided to try to bootstrap this thing as long as we can.
And the one thing that winds me up is when people they get announce that they've got seed funding, angel funding, and they think they've succeeded. You haven't. You've just started the journey onto a different pathway. And it always frustrates me, because there are a number of businesses that have got funding, spent all the money, haven't really been able to create the client base that they sold that they were going to be able to do, and then the business folds. It is a situation that lots of people think, as you say, it seems very sexy. Oh, we've got angel funding or seed funding, and actually it does bring other complications. There's an input from someone else that is funding you, so you've got to toe the line a little bit to what they want as well.
100%. Yeah, and it does. Even now, we've had to make some certain decisions. We've had to make changes in how we think and approach things and stuff. And you have the flexibility to do that when you are owner of your own destiny. When you do have to answer to someone, it makes it so much harder to be able to make really fast moves.
So you told me about your ideal clients, so coaches, consultants, service providers. What are the marketing strategies that you use to be able to acquire those clients?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to, so I always default to, I call it the traffic pyramid. I always go back to this. So basically the traffic pyramid is made up of content, obviously. We're a content business, so there's a lot of content involved, but content that is actually, I call it activated by way of if like for us, we leverage Facebook and LinkedIn. We did have a podcast, but I'm actually expecting I'm due in a month's time, so we've put that on pause. Thank you. And the podcast, and then a blog post. So I always recommend even to people who sign up to CapSho, because it does create a lot of content, like a lot. And it can be overwhelming for people to be faced with, oh my gosh, now I have to. It sounds really sexy because you feel like you can be everywhere really easily, but then you realize that there's actually a bit of work to actually still publish, and not just publish, but actually work the content. And by working it, if it's, for example, from an SEO perspective, making sure that it is written we do a really good starting point that is based on best practices, but there's still some things that you have to do manually, some editing things, etc. Even social media platforms, they are not all the same, that we actually create different content based on the different platforms. And so activating these platforms means actually spending a good amount of time on them still. And so I always mention my strong recommendation to CapShovians, especially new ones, is focus on just 2 platforms. Right. So, we start with content always. Content is the foundation for any kind of visibility, getting any kind of traffic. And then from there, one of my favorite things, and I've done this almost by accident since back to the Chalkpot, our first business, is leaning on partnerships a lot. So even now, at the time of this recording next week, we actually have a challenge that we're doing with Ecamm. That's a really great partnership that is a win-win for everyone involved. And so we've always lent on partnerships, but partnerships could also look like, when in my first business with the Chalkpot, we worked a lot with bloggers, food influencers, people in that space who can help us get the visibility and spread the word even more. Now we do work with other coaches who maybe have some kind of niche strategy that would really help out the rest of our audience, or other service providers like an Ecamm, like a ConvertKit, for example, things like that, where we have complementary products that can help our audiences. And then the last kind of pillar, I guess, on the traffic pyramid is paid ads. Now, we haven't actually gone down that path. We are going to start to explore it towards the end of the year, but essentially there's a reason why you start with content as a foundation, is because the content kind of has to work, and you need to know the message that actually compels people to action in order to then put money behind it. And so those 3 pillars, so content, partnerships, and ads, is my bread and butter strategy for literally any business that I was going to go. That would be how I would acquire.
That's interesting, the idea of partnerships. So is that referral partners? Is that complementary service? You mentioned about complementary services that they support. So I don't know Ecamm. What's the challenge that you're doing with Ecamm?
So Ecamm they're a recording and live stream platform. Okay. And so basically, the challenge that we're doing next week it's called Who Dares Streams. And it's basically all about just getting going streaming. For anyone who is a little bit daunted by it, it's like, let's just get going. For anyone who's been doing it, it's like, how can we level up getting engagement, getting attendance, etc., getting results essentially at the end of the day. And then that's like the going live or the recording part of the content, and then CapSho comes by way of, now let's amplify that message, amplify where else you can get reach on these different platforms.
So you're involved with the AI technology. Part of what you do, AI is part of interwoven into what you do. Bit of a zoom out question. Is AI a bubble, a tech bubble that's going to burst?
Do you mean from like an investment perspective, as in all of these?
So we had the .com bubble. Everyone suddenly produced websites, and there was 100 different providers that were building websites, and eventually all the money that was being spent on them, it was an absolute farce in the end.
Yes.
And it's looking to an extent that the AI technology could hit that sort of. So I believe AI is going to influence business and culture and society and politics and all these different areas that it's going to interweave into.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of money being pushed into new AI technologies at the moment. So funding and sort of decision makers are thinking everything has to be, it's got to be an AI element. If you look at all of the companies, everyone's saying powered by AI or
Yes.
using AI as something. And it worries me, not that AI won't be impactful in business, in society, in culture, whatever. It's that there's a lot of, I don't know, put it this way, silly money being invested into AI, which could have a bit of a consequence to the AI technology itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting question that, to be fair, I probably haven't put as much thought into that specific part of AI. Maybe because I've just, from a funding perspective, that's just not something that
Sure.
I've really gone down the path with. I do think that, like, when you look at the numbers, they're ridiculous. They're like in terms of like valuations and things like that.
Yeah.
But then I counter that with AI it is here to stay, just as you said.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be incredibly pervasive. What I do see happening at a more micro scale is, and probably more in the short to medium term, is that there's going to be a big proliferation of platforms that leverage these core AI, other core AI platforms. And the danger with that is because, I don't know if you've heard about the term vibe coding.
No, I
but
haven't.
that's become like a thing where, because there are some software providers out there now who help code. And so anyone, like, I could just hop onto these platforms and be like, well, I want to create this an app that does this and this. And then you're just vibe coding. That's what, you know, but it's not backed by any security, because I'm not a developer. I don't really know anything much about infrastructure. I don't know much about security. I'm like, if I were to create my own payment processing tool, my own database, like, there is so much risk I see in this happening, and I can only see that it's going to happen more and more, because as with there's going to be more people who can access more of these tools and this kind of technology. So at a more micro, like, I see that's going to be a big risk. I feel like hopefully fingers crossed, investors are savvy enough to see through some of this stuff, because I think that if they're not, then that can actually pose a really huge risk for if money goes into these types of businesses, then that will definitely burst.
I saw yesterday on a social media platform, which it was exactly that. Create your own website with ChatGPT and you'll never need to have a coder again, a developer again. And as you say, it could have a massive impact, as you say, like cybersecurity, all that side of coding, and as you say, architecture as well. It's all that you pay specialists to help you with. They're not going to be present in these sorts of endeavors and these sorts of tasks. So I think that's very insightful. I think that's a super interesting idea that everyone's been sold that, like, because the other thing, sorry, just on a tangent, like, when I know, because I've researched it, that ChatGPT is 70 to 80% right. It's not 100% right. Will it ever be 100%? That's a discussion over there. But you have to have that human element. You have to have that authenticity. You have to have your message coming across in there. So at the start, when you were talking about CapSho, was even though you automate a lot of things like show notes and titles and things like that, it always still needs an intervention to make it authentic, to make it yours, to personalize it, to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why even with CapSho, like, we very deliberately always start with some kind of foundational content, i.e. a podcast episode or a webinar or a guest interview, because this is the richness that AI can't create. This conversation that's even happening between us, like, AI can't create that, right? Because it's based in, like, my stories, the insightful questions that you ask, the thoughts and the opinions that I'm providing. AI just cannot replicate that. And so that's really where, for now, AI's role has to be, which is not to create this content. We're creating it right now through this conversation, but it can amplify it. Now that we've created it,
it's a tool,
right?
isn't
Exactly.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It shouldn't be. It's an interesting one. There's a Michael Parkinson, who was a 1980s, 90s interviewer in the UK, very famous at the time. He'd have a chat show on a Friday night, and they've created an AI which sounds like him. That's first thing. They are now interviewing current celebrities by using an AI Michael Parkinson, and it's all of his mannerisms, but it's also, they're not predefined questions. They are trying to build it that it's a natural language, that it will respond to the answers that people are giving. Now, as a podcaster, that kind of concerns me, because you could just take a copy of me and then just get me interviewing other people. But I do think this is why podcasting will endeavour, and why podcasting will, and I think it's a smart move for you to have podcasting, webinars, training at the core of your business, because that people still want the human side of a show, and the mistakes or the things that you don't or it goes off in a tangent. That type of authenticity is going to be more desired by people, because you shouldn't be able to create that, and you probably won't be able to create it for a while, where AI can do that automatically. What's the point in having an AI bot interviewing an AI bot? Like, that doesn't sound exciting
crazy,
for me as content.
No. I know. And if you can just imagine like the world where it's like AIs are just talking to other AIs, like podcast, but even like engagement on social media and emailing back and forth, like it's just going to become a world of AIs.
AIs just talking to each
AIs.
other. Moving on, you've been named the 100 women to know in America.
I know. I feel like as an Aussie, I don't deserve that.
How does it feel to be named, and does that make you proud? Does it feel like responsibility? Is it just a nice sort of thing to be named as? How have you responded to that?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. It's obviously any kind of recognition is always going to be nice and welcome. And I do try to, even through doing interviews like this, with different perspectives, and there are definitely other more teaching style. Like I definitely try to lean into that around like, how can I just share more what I know around marketing, because that's like the thing that I nerd out about, and entrepreneurship and things like that. It does have, like with all good things and recognition, it does have a sense of responsibility, but I think that's fair. As in, the more that we live our lives and experience, the more that I do think that we should be sharing that and helping others. So it's definitely not been a negative thing by any means. It's definitely not felt like a crippling kind of responsibility. It's actually just spurred me on to be like, okay, now I have validation, whether I needed it or not, that I have things that I should share. And so
absolutely. That's why you're
it's been great.
Podcast guesting.
Yes.
What would you say, how have you evolved as a leader, do you feel?
Oh, yeah, quite a bit. I can have very strong opinions and a way of approaching things. Definitely in my younger years, it was my way or the highway type thing. That has definitely been tempered over time, for sure. I think because I have recognized that I am by no means perfect at all. The decisions that I've made in the past, I'm like, what in the world was I thinking? So I know that I am not perfect by any means. And so I definitely am a lot more open to, okay, what do my team think? Even to the point of, what is it that excites them? What do they want to be working on that can actually, because I might have a particular idea of where the business should be heading and what we should be working on. But if that doesn't excite the people around me who's actually making it happen, like it's actually not going to be, it's going to be even worse for business. Yeah. So I definitely have found that my style and my approach has changed quite a bit.
And what type of leader would you describe yourself as now?
Probably more of a servant leader. I just is sitting back, letting people almost, as I said, what is it that what are the types of things that they would want to pursue? What are the types of things that they could see would really help the business? And then how do I just help support and guide through that?
What would you say your risk appetite is?
Considering that I've been in entrepreneurship for quite a while and just as I said, sheer will and grit have just made things happen, even though it's looked like we've been in so much debt. We've had there are times when I'm like, I've been at a loss. I did not know how I was going to get us out of declining revenues, obviously paying back debt, all of the things. And when you take all of that into account, I never thought that I was actually much of a risk taker. I'm not into gambling or any of the mass or mainstream kind of risk taking things. But I think as it pertains to business, I think for me, it's either this or I have to go back to corporate and do the corporate thing. I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to keep taking these risks.
Yeah. And you're right. Like gambling and things like that, that's the risk taking of that isn't a good measure of business risk because making business decisions, which are risky, you're backing yourself to succeed and to win. And that's a different risk appetite than putting £1,000, £100,000 on a horse. That's stupidity more than anything else. So I do think it is a different risk. And the reason why I ask this question a lot because I'm always finds it quite interesting how much entrepreneurs see themselves as a risk. And obviously that often changes over time. The older they get, the less riskier decisions they're making. And the fact that you've gone into debt to make this business successful, the fact that you've not taken funding, which has risk on both sides, whether you do it or you don't do it, there are risks pertaining to that. It's always an interesting question for me because it's just the backing of yourself that you're going to succeed with your business is risky. And it can fail. You've been through companies that you've started and that have failed. But I suppose the question for you more is, do you think you're making riskier decisions earlier on in your life with the other businesses, and that you've learned how to moderate that risk, or are you still taking the same risk appetite that you were then?
Oh, yeah, 100%. It was also probably the nature of the business. As I mentioned, hospitality, it's a whole different beast.
It is the hardest.
Yeah, it is the hardest. And as I said, you're in the red before you even open because you've got lease, you've got to fit out the place. So you're already hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt when you even open. I wouldn't do that again. That is the answer to your question. Would I take that risk again? Probably not because I've been through it. I was, shall I say, naive at the time and didn't really quite know what I was doing. But having gone through that, I'm I know that I would not want to take that kind of risk. Would I still take the kind of risk that, as you said, and it's so insightful what you're saying, backing myself and getting into debt to do a different kind of debt. But yeah, it was just at a different scale, a different level when we were doing it before.
Do you have an exit strategy?
We do, yes. So we would look to sell. We're actually, it's something that we've been thinking about.
Okay, you don't have to go into too much more detail. It's just interesting. It's an interesting question because it's I've spoken to some really smart business owners that have said you need to have an exit strategy before you even start. But that can be many things. It doesn't have to be selling the business. It can be becoming just a chairman or just on the board and you're just having a limited impact. Yeah. Okay. I won't push you too much farther on that. It's absolutely fine. Have you or do you have coaches or mentors? Is that something that's been important to your growth?
Yeah, and definitely depending on what stage I'm at personally and professionally, and the team are at. But we have always had, coaches, mentors all throughout the journey, whether some have been paid, some have just been through connections and relationships. But yes, always. It's so hard, I think, to do this alone. Even though I have co-founders, we're still in our own little bubble and we're great because we all have very complementary skills and ways of thinking. But sometimes it's just really important to have this objective person who can just look at even that relationship and be like, oh, here's some things to look out for or things to...
Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick-fire questions. They don't need a quick-fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
Wow, what's the best decision? I think... going into entrepreneurship, obviously. If we park that one, I actually think the move to the States was probably one of the best decisions I feel like we've made. It just completely upended. Sometimes we need to force ourselves to get uncomfortable in order to, I'll say, quote unquote, succeed, whatever success means to you. But I definitely think that having done that has just opened our eyes to more and broadened our horizons like a lot more, and our relationships and all the things that come with just getting out of your comfort zone. Yeah, I think that's been one of the best decisions.
Yeah, and that was a very brave and inspiring decision to make. It really is, like, taking yourself out of your comfort zone by such a large stretch is incredible. So well done. Next question is, what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Oh gosh, I've been given so much good advice. Okay, what's the best? The best piece of advice, I think early on, and this comes back to the funding question even that you asked, because as I mentioned, we were entertaining the thought of getting funding very early on in CapSho, especially because we were so early. And I remember speaking to someone and he was like, okay, if you break the numbers down, because in my mind I was like, okay, there's this big chunk of money that we could technically, and we would have this much runway, etc. And so he was helping me through that decision making, and he was like, hey, if you break it down, like, to break even each month, what would you need to do? And do the calculations like, hey, this much is, okay, how many users? It was just like, let's go back to basics, right? Like any of us could do it. But sometimes, again, this is why you sometimes need mentors or people who you can talk to. You just sometimes just need someone to like break through your own like cyclical thinking. And we just laid it out in a way that was like, this is completely achievable. To not only reach break even, but to actually start making money. And that does not need to require some of the potential negatives that can come with getting funding, as we were discussing. And so I think that, but what that really boiled down to when he helped me through that process was, again, come back to that same theme of, we can do this. We just have to back ourselves to be able to reach those numbers, which are very doable once you break it down and you go, okay, we have a plan to actually do that. And so I think really some of the best advice is just being almost like playing back to us that we can do it, that we do have the skills and the know-how and the capabilities to actually make this thing work. Yeah. So I think that would be.
Thank you. And this might be tied to, who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Yeah, so there was a mentor that I had in corporate. So back when I was in corporate, he was an informal mentor, but he was like my boss's boss. And I remember that this kind of played into the whole like quarter life crisis thing as well. But at the time I was up for a promotion and I didn't get it. And again, at the time, it was like everything was because there was a path. It was like, you just get promoted. And I remember reaching out to him and I was like, I really just want to understand like why I've been doing I've been getting rated really great. No one has a bad thing to say about me. I've been all of the things. And he actually asked me a question that was like, he was like, why do you really want it? And I was like, my immediate thing was like, why wouldn't I? Like, is that not why we're, to get promoted and all of the things? But there was a deeper meaning, obviously, to the question that he was asking, because I think he could see as well, it wasn't the place that I wanted to be. I think he could, and that's probably, to be honest, why I didn't get promoted was because I was already in a way 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I was still performing and doing the best, but I think when I look back at that time, it was like, I think that people could see that my heart wasn't in it.
Yeah.
And so that that conversation as well was what propelled me to just, when we talk about entrepreneurship and starting that journey, was just like, okay, we can do this thing because, you know, even in the corporate space, like they can already see that this is not the thing that I want to be doing. Yeah. And so I would say that having had that one conversation, being posed that one question, really actually helped change the trajectory of my career.
Amazing. Thank you. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I try not to have regrets, but they're
Everyone
inevitably
does.
going to happen.
Everyone
I know.
does.
From an entrepreneurship perspective, like we definitely got into some bad deals. That is probably the things that I most regret because of the fact that it just set us back a lot. It's probably not like the most insightful answer, but it's probably the most truthful for me. Is just I feel like we could have accelerated a lot more. Again, hindsight is 2020.
Sure.
If not for some decisions and some deals that we got into that was just really expensive and really painful and really draining to get out of.
Next question. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of like creating a life that we love. Like we're not back in when I was like really like teenage years young, you read about, and I used to read novels where like like fiction novels like Barbara Taylor Bradford or, oh gosh, I forgot the author. Anyway, these fiction novels where it was based on these like big tycoons and stuff who were making like they were just super uber rich. And I was like, oh, that's like the ideal. I want to be this uber rich person. But now that I've been through the journey that I have, that's not necessary for me anymore. Like I love the life that we created. It's simple. It's not complicated as much as entrepreneurship can be not complicated. We have flexibility. My husband and I spend a ton of time together. We're expecting obviously a baby, and we're going to be able to spend time because that's what entrepreneurship should be there to fuel your life.
Flexibility, it's freedom.
Exactly.
It gives you instead of being in the office all day and all night.
Yeah, and so I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of, is that we've been able to actually build that kind of life for ourselves.
Amazing. Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
I guess you would know this, but I've traveled to every continent except for Antarctica.
Nice.
So that's going to be next on the list.
Yeah. Just wait till you've had the child for a little while. Yeah. I wouldn't take him or her out there straight away. Favourite country that you've visited?
Oh my gosh, I have way too many too. So one that we've loved. So we got married in France, funnily enough, but we love vacationing in Italy. And we've only ever been to Japan once. So I really want to go back to Japan. But I think if you asked my husband, he would probably say Argentina, like South America.
That's on my bucket list, Argentina.
Yeah. Okay. Even if it's just for the meat, that's why he loves it. Yeah. I don't know if this is recency bias because our last holiday was to Italy, but I just loved, I just love Tuscany and the wine, which I can't enjoy right now, but soon. Yeah.
Last question is, what does legacy mean to you?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Because I was never one to, and I don't think I still am one to be really, there's some people who really care about like their name still having longevity. I don't know if I am in that bucket. I've never really been like, I could not think of anything worse than being famous, for example. I just would not want to. For me, I think legacy is going to be, now that we are expecting, it's going to be family. It's just how do we just not pass on, but also nurture like the best relationships and the best human beings that we can. That contribute in their own way to the world and can pass that on, like in terms of them then bringing out the best in others around them. So I think that's probably what it means to us now.
And lastly, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you or your business?
Yeah, CapSho.com, CapSho.com, to learn more about the software. I am personally mainly on Facebook, sometimes on LinkedIn, so just my full name on there. But yeah, CapSho.com. And Mark, I don't know if you wanted to share the special...
I do want to share something very special that Deidre has shared with us for people that are listening and watching this show. If you go to capsho.com/free trial, and when you go onto there, if you put on the coupon, the promo code MARK, M-A-R-K, you will be able to get 50% off CapSho. It's an amazing offer that Deidre is sharing with my audience. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm sure there'll be loads of people that will be interested in finding more about CapSho and hopefully taking up that free trial and hopefully signing up afterwards.
Yes, I love it. Yeah, hopefully you love CapSho, and even if you don't, please give us the feedback. We love to learn.
Brilliant. All right, thanks Deidre. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.